I thank you for inviting me over for a brief understanding of anthropology as it would help in as a career in the civil services. Uh, Friends, I'm in the rank of a principal secretary with the government of Chhattisgarh, and I've spent about 25 years in the Indian Administrative Service. Having done that, uh, and having understood the value and the context of anthropology in appearing for the civil services and for living the life of a civil servant, I would like to share a few thoughts as it appears to me across the decades, and also in the context of appearing for the examination as well. Uh, there's a lot of aspirations across the country amongst young people to join the UPSC, through the UPSC, joining the Indian Administrative Services and all the other civil services as well. In that context, and in the context of anthropology appearing as an appealing and a very interesting optional that is required for the mains, it is in that context that I would like to speak. Apart from my master's degree in public administration, public policy, I must mention that I also have a doctorate in anthropology, and that is precisely why Sunita must have thought that it is possible that I have some thoughts to share with all of you. Considering, I would say that my optional, I opted for anthropology, of course, in my UPSC exam, and that was about 25 years ago. And ever since, young people like most of you have always approached me with an interest in anthropology, and it has bothered me in some sense, and in some sense, it's very appealing as well. It bothered me in the sense that I feel anthropology is a very rich space. And at times when, like 2.5 decades ago, when we began studying anthropology, it was one of the emerging subjects of the world, of the globe. And very little was known about it. And our interest in studying anthropology had its issues as well. But Indian anthropology at that context was just emerging, and there were very few scholars who were a part of this whole process. The Indian anthropology movement later spread through the whole of India, and we have various universities today teaching anthropology even at undergrad levels. So I'd like to kind of appeal to you that anthropology, in short, is a very interesting and a very appealing subject, not just in terms for appearing for the UPSC examination, but even otherwise, given the definition of the subject as study of culture. It's as simple as it can be put. But culture includes everything that pertains to humankind. And I object, of course, to the word to be used as mankind. You would see this in old anthropology textbooks and in old material that is available for anthropology. So you can replace man with human and then do the reading. As you do that, there is nothing that anthropology does not touch in terms of human cultures. There is nothing that anthropology does not study that humankind has today. So it's forever. It has frontiers that will keep opening up. It can study anything and everything that pertains to humankind. And that makes it extremely valuable, not just for an examination like UPSC, but to humankind per se, and to your life and to your living. So while it was a big asset for me to appear for the UPSC through anthropology, it also enabled me to be a better human being. It also enabled me to understand the social structure, organization, social movements, and the issues of Indian society, Indian culture, and the issues which emerge from time to time in different parts of this country in the context of being in administration in different districts of the states in which I served. Coming to this, The first phase of my conversation would be about anthropology as a subject in which you could choose for appearing for the UPSC. As most of you would know, there are two papers, which is paper 1 and paper 2, pertains to 250 marks each. Paper 1 includes social cultural anthropology and physical anthropology. Socio-cultural anthropology is a cultural study of mankind, as they would call, and I would say humankind. And physical anthropology pertains to biology, concepts, cells, genetics, inheritance, forensic anthropology, human evolution, and of course, primates and their life and so on. Sociocultural anthropology pertains to theoretical and foundational concepts of anthropology. It talks of cultural institutions of humankind, family, marriage, kinship, so on, and culture and society. These are the basics of paper 1. When you move to paper 2, you have Indian anthropology. Indian anthropology includes conceptual notions of caste, tribes, and villages, and action applied anthropology, tribal anthropology, and so on. At the end of paper 2, you would have very important issues which pertains to the Indian context or the Indian country as such. Perhaps this does not apply to other countries of the world, which is in the context again of culture and civilization. I would like to remind you that the word culture and civilization is not used in common parlance in anthropology as it would be used elsewhere. So it's defined in a particular way, and you need to understand that. And once you understand that, it would be easier to follow the other concepts. In the context of culture and civilization, you would have issues towards the end of paper 2 as specific to India: language, ethnicity, caste, communalism, social change, regionalism, and even religious fundamentalism, so on. And other issues that you can think of in the modern concept. So this being the gist of paper 1 and paper 2, I'd like to sort of walk you through the syllabi so that we understand what we're dealing with and what you need to confront and what you need to prepare for. And if you are not a student of anthropology, and if you haven't studied anthropology, perhaps in your undergraduation, or you haven't read anthropology as such, what would you like? What would you be confronting? And what do you need to expect? If you have the syllabi of anthropology, paper 1 and paper 2, you could even look at it as I speak. Otherwise, you might like to listen to me. Paper 1, it looks to me so much like, you know, the syllabi we had for our post-graduation in anthropology. So if some of you have done post-graduation in anthropology, this is just a cakewalk. I mean, you just need to stick the syllabi on the wall of your Almira and keep gazing at it. And remember what you studied in your post-graduation. That is what precisely I did. So I invite you to look at paper 1. It begins with meaning, scope, and development of anthropology, which is basically concept and development. And it talks of relationships with other disciplines like social sciences, behavioral sciences, life sciences, medical sciences, earth sciences, and humanities. Now, what is studied here is what is common between all these disciplines. I might like to remind you that anthropology is so interdisciplinary that many of the subjects which other people refuse to study and might say that this doesn't belong to our realm or domain. It is anthropologists that who come forward to study those kind of phenomenon. I want to bring that to your notice. And we also learn what is common, what is different, how are they related, and how is this that it becomes interdisciplinary. Behavioral science is something very, very important, and it could be studied, imagine, in economics as well as in anthropology. So it will be very important to understand what do economists study in behavioral scientists, what that is different from what anthropologists study in behavioral science. Then we talk about main branches of anthropology. Like I mentioned to you, sociocultural anthropology, biological anthropology, archaeological anthropology, and linguistic anthropology. Here I need to mention that sociocultural anthropology is basically cultural anthropology. It's a European anthropology, which is called social anthropology, and the American anthropology, which is called cultural anthropology. So in India, we call it sociocultural anthropology. We draw in from the European theorists and from the American social scientists, and hence the term. In biological anthropology, or as I would call physical anthropology, you have a very many overlapping concepts of science and genetics, which is taken in detail as we go ahead. Archaeological anthropology is an area which is very interesting, and very little work has been done on this. We have very few scholars in India who have worked on this and who are working on this. It's an overlapping space of archaeology and anthropology and linguistic anthropology. Humankind's major difference from the animal kingdom or from the primates is the notion of language that humans possess. And it's this language that makes us unique on the globe. And along with this language, there are certain features which are very specific to humankind. And the study of this kind of anthropology is called linguistic anthropology. And there's a whole lot of work which is ongoing and which has happened along the lines of linguistic anthropology. It's one of the major kinds of anthropology that we have. As I mentioned, human evolution and emergence of man. We have issues of human evolution, organic evolution. I would like you to remember, while I say that this emerges from physical anthropology, to remember the theories of evolution that you must have studied in your high school science. And that is all that is required for you to understand this as you read this and go ahead. And you have the synthetic theory of evolution, of course. You have all the new thoughts that have emerged, new theories that have emerged in the recent past on evolutionary biology. And you have a study on primates. You have different kinds of man that emerged in different phases of Earth in the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic ages, Homo erectus, Neanderthal man, Rhodesian man, and the Homo sapiens. So you have that part to study for physical anthropology. You have cytology to be studied. You have prehistoric archaeology. You have theories of cultural evolution, which goes in through Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic ages. Apart from Chalcolithic, Copper, Bronze, and Iron Age, I'd again like to remind you that culture and civilization in anthropology is very different from the terms that are loosely used in common parlance otherwise. Of course, anthropology examines what the nature of culture is, what is the nature of society. It talks of marriage, family, kinship, and it also makes us understand about social organization, economic organization, political organization, and of course, religion, which is a major part of the studies, where we can talk of how magic and eventually religion and science have engulfed our lives and so on. So all of this is a part of your syllabi. We have anthropological theories. As much as sociological theories, we have sociocultural theories as well. And these are overlapping theories. So if you look at sociology, you may look at economics, you look at social sciences, you look at humanities. All these theories are largely overlapping. We have cultural evolutionism, historical particularism, functionalism, structural functionalism, structuralism, culture and personality, and neo-evolutionism, cultural materialism, and of course, symbolic and interpretative theories, which are the most recent, along with, I must mention, the postmodernist theories after Derrida. So you have, from time to time, theories are added to this, but then this is the basic matrix on which you will work, and you will try to understand how culture developed and how culture disseminated and how culture transformed, or how cultures are changing each other or transforming each other or merging together. So all these questions, and you will find answers to it through these various theories. From, you have all kinds of theories from, like I mentioned, as a syllabi indicates, from classical evolutionism to postmodernism. You may have newer theories as time goes by as well. And then you have culture, language, and communication. As indicated earlier, language is one major component which differentiates humankind from other forms of life. So language as it is, and of course, you know, it could be verbal and non-verbal communication, and various connotations related to it that needs to be studied. We also have research methods in anthropology, which is very unique to anthropology. So there's a fieldwork tradition, and there's a distinction between technique, method, and methodology. And there are tools for data collection. You have analysis, interpretation, presentation of data. This is the first part. Now, there's a very interesting part which overlaps with, again, biology, which is human genetics. So this is basically, you needn't be perturbed by this part of anthropology if you are a social science student, because this is very basic kind of science, which is required for all of us to understand how we live or who we are. So that kind of biology comes from high school science, and that is good enough as a basis for you to understand human genetics as the syllabi goes on. Here we are talking only of cytology, meiosis, mitosis, and so on. And through this understanding of genes and genetics, you would then understand race and racism. And that is how you understand ethnocentrism, cultural relativism, and have a holistic sense of what humankind looks like. So it's just basic science. So please do not be perturbed by this kind of human genetics. It's very basic, and basic textbooks will enable you to sail through this. And then you have, of course, genetic markers, what it means and what it indicates. Then there is ecological anthropology. So ecology, the interaction between ecology and humankind, between humankind and ecology. And I think it is of much relevance today, given the context of climate change and so on. So there could be genetic and non-genetic factors and so on. Then there is epidemiological anthropology. Then it could become medical anthropology. You could even think of very many kinds of anthropology. So it talks of diseases and anthropology. Then we have human growth and development, and various life stages and how we go through. We have demography, again, very basic kind of demography. If you're a geography student, that would be very easy for you to perceive. Or if you have read geography in your high school, that's sufficient enough. Then we come to applications of anthropology. As I mentioned earlier, it could be action anthropology, it could be applied anthropology, it could be other forms of anthropology. So, and it could be a bit of DNA technology and forensic anthropology and so on. So it could be a little overlapping, but it covers as to what you have already studied, and you would be able to understand the concepts easily in the context. This is what paper one looks like. So paper one is about socioculture, basic tenets of theories and concepts and definitions. Let me share with you that it is very important to differentiate the concepts and the perceptions and the definitions of each and every word, which is very important in anthropology. Like I mentioned, culture, civilization, marriage, family, all this is distinctly defined. If you absorb these definitions precisely, you will have no difficulty in analyzing when questions emerge. Because all this is, this has to be written. I mean, it has to be written in length. So unless you understand the definitions and the concepts, you may not be able to present yourself well. And once you understand this, then you will understand how anthropology is different from sociology. Because for most people, sociology and anthropology are not different. But for anthropologists, sociology and anthropology are very different. So it enables you to understand the nuances of what anthropologists study. I think I'll go into paper 2, which talks of Indian culture and Indian civilization. Mind you, culture and civilization are defined very differently in anthropology again. So we go through again the ages, Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, Chalcolithic, Bronze Age, and so on. The Paleo area, then the ethnoarchaeology, all this in the context of India. Demographic profile is very interesting studies. Then you have studies of the Indian social system, social organization. Then you have the caste system. You also have sacred complex and man and sacred complex, because that's very specific to our country. When you study it, you will get to know. You have very interesting religions prevalent in India: Buddhism, Jainism, Islam, Christianity, and how it is a part of the Indian society as much as Hinduism. Emergence and growth and development in India of 18th, 19th, and 20th century scholar administrators. Contributions of Indian anthropologists to tribal and caste studies, very specific to India. Then you have the notion of an Indian village. So there is an entire branch of rural anthropology which deals with exclusively village studies. It's called village studies. We have very eminent scholars from abroad and from India who have worked on all of this. I don't want to name them. It's an endless list. And you have newer people coming into the realm. So there are very many classic studies. There are classic concepts like Little India, Great India, and there are a lot of words which are used very loosely but very specific to in the context of anthropology, like socialization. Then the tribe caste continuum, which is very specific to our country. It's very unique to our country. All these terms and terminologies are coined and studied very deeply, and they distinguish us from the rest of the world. So all of this needs to be studied, and Sanskritization, Westernization, and modernization, all very specifically defined. That is the Indian village. So I'll not go into it. It's a very set of interesting studies which are prevalent. And then you have the tribal situation in India. So the tribal situation could largely be, it could look, physical anthropology could also look at it. So you have a bit of that as well. But also the distribution of the tribal population across the country. And in this context, I don't want you to forget it, though it's not part of the syllabi. There is something called the PVTGs, the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. They're not mentioned here, but along with the minorities, they form a very considerable set of our population who needs attention, concern, and they form a strong fabric of study for anthropology. So that is something that you need to take care of. I must remind you that the PVTGs were earlier called PTGs, primitive tribal groups. But I'd like to also remind you that anthropology does not define primitive, quote unquote, in the manner in which we loosely use the word primitive. And that means that we are ethnocentric. Given that, then we let go of this word called primitive. And then we have started using the word particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So that is how the government also have defined them. That is what I would like to bring to your notice. Tribal communities across our country are confronted with major issues across, these decades or centuries, or as you would like to know. So land alienation is one of them, poverty, indebtedness, low literacy, all these are issues. And there are several reasons, the several concerns, several constitutional safeguards for all these communities. So all this needs to be studied in detail. So that's what the syllabi says. And it talks of social change. I also talked of tribe caste continuum. Then there's a notion of ethnicity. We are also racially different people. I come from Kerala. I live somewhere else, but then my features are very different from yours. All these are racial differences, and these are ethnic differences as well. How various religions have, landed in our country, how they have transformed the lives of people, and the impact on tribal communities. Then tribe and nation. So there are very interesting notions of tribal councils on one hand. We have constitutional safeguards pertaining to that. And then we have the notion of the nation state and the nation on the other hand. We have a history of administration of these tribal areas. And then the role of tribes and tribal development, role of anthropology in that. we have various theories on that as well. I wouldn't go into it, but then there are anthropologists who have contributed to that kind of theory, establishing the necessity of anthropology in administration of tribes and tribal areas. We have had prime ministers coming up with the theories on how we will look at tribal communities, and we have studies pertaining to certain areas of our country which are very specific to administration, but you will need the permits to go in. So that, those permits are slowly withdrawn over a period of time, but there is a history of all of that. And we need to understand why so, and what was the context of all of that. And then the contribution of anthropology to the understanding of, all the issues that confront our country, which is very unique and specific to our country. But I would always say that, it's like, if you look at Europe and you look at our country, Europe has similar issues as us. So if you say ethnicity, then Europe has that. If you say regionalism, then Europe has that. Then you will have communalism, Europe has that. Any issue and political upheavals and so on, Europe has that. So we are I would say we are Europe many times over. While Europe might claim we are India many times over. So this is very, very specific to our country, and these things could be studied in a particular way. And anthropology offers us insight into all of this through its theories and understandings, and very interesting field work which has been done by anthropologists over decades, and very intense kind of studies which are being studied, which is very specific to anthropology. No other discipline offers this. So that is what the syllabus offers you. While the syllabus offers you this, and I believe that if you read your high school and your higher secondary school social sciences, it will help you, enable you to understand our country, the cultural context, the papers that we have discussed, some of the notions that we have discussed, and it will enable you to read the texts and perhaps the notes on all of this better and understand better, and to be able to write answers in a very specified way, in a very intense way, which will differentiate you from other students who are appearing with other subjects. These papers also will enable you to write your general essay better. You might be looking at the earlier question papers of earlier years, and general essays are very general, but then you know how it goes. The general essays have a very overlapping subject, very interdisciplinary subject, and your reading and understanding of anthropology, its definition, its concepts and theories will enable you to choose some social science, essay, and be able to perform better than others in the context. I also feel that anthropology will enable you to understand general studies better. Whether it is prelims or whether it is mains, it will help you to be, I would say, very thorough in issues pertaining to the issues very specific to our country, very specific to culture and civilization, very specific to even basic, science and biology, and perhaps to issues like scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs, minorities, tribal communities, and so on. So you are covering a huge gamut of things once you choose anthropology. And I also feel that there is a very important paper in your UPSC, which is called the ethics paper. So you will be able to understand and to conceptualize. Ethics is a very, very complex and very difficult thing to fathom initially. I mean, ethics is very broad and it's limitless, as I would call it. So when you confront that kind of a paper, it's very important to have these kind of ideas in your head. Like, the terminologies, the definitions, the concepts, and how you perceive humankind, how you perceive culture, how you perceive one human from the other, and it enables you to understand various things perhaps other people may not be able to. And that keeps you, it enables you to move a step forward before others. So I think this is how I'd like to see the anthropology paper. It has changed over the years. And but then I also see that the kind of syllabi that is available is very basic, and it pertains to a postgraduate level. That's it. And it's accessible to all. And if you have read your social sciences and your sciences in your 10th and 12th, well, I think you should be able to do this, and it shouldn't be very challenging at all. After all, anthropology is just not the study of culture. It's a way of life. Thank you.